Hello hockey fans and welcome back to another video. If you were to ask the hockey world who Arber Xhekaj was before this season began, the vast majority of fans would have absolutely no idea who you were talking about. After all, the guy was left unselected at the draft on numerous occasions, he was never featured on an NHL scouting list, and he produced minimal scoring numbers in the OHL over the last 3 seasons. He wasn't exactly a can't-miss prospect, you know. Despite his lack of name recognition and the minimal hype around him though, Xhekaj has somehow forced his way onto an NHL roster, as he earned a spot on the Montreal Canadiens out of training camp, and he continues to play for the Habs to this very day. In fact, Xhekaj has made such a strong impact that he has earned plenty of admiration across the Canadiens organisation, as his physical style and his willingness to drop the gloves has already made the 21-year-old a fan favourite at the Bell Centre. But how has he done it? How has Xhekaj defied the odds and earned his place in the show? Well, let's take a look at his unlikely journey to the league and try to find out, shall we? This is the story of Arber Xhekaj, from Costco to the NHL. Born in Hamilton, Ontario on January 30th, 2001, Arber Xhekaj began his career in the Greater Toronto Hockey League, where he spent 2 seasons playing for the Toronto Titans under-15 team and the Mississauga Senators under-16 team. Despite potting 10 points for the Senators during the 2016-17 season, Xhekaj's slight frame and his questionable overall game meant that he would be left unselected during the Ontario Hockey League's 2017 entry draft. Having been one of the only eligible players on his team to not be drafted to the OHL, and having contemplated ending his hockey career as a result, Xhekaj's parents, both of whom were first-generation immigrants from Eastern Europe, encouraged their son to keep going, and considering where he finds himself today, he clearly made the right choice. Once he picked himself up and got back to work, Xhekaj would earn a spot on the St. Catharines Falcons of the Greater Ontario Junior Hockey League for the 2017-18 season. During this time, the 16-year-old would begin to garner interest from the OHL's Kitchener Rangers, whose scouting staff went from mild curiosity to making regular visits by the end of the year. As the season came to an end, Kitchener had watched Xhekaj develop into a bold, aggressive blue liner who was able to hold his own against bigger, stronger, and older competition far better than most kids in his age group. And after he finished the season with 23 points and 134 penalty minutes in just 57 regular season games, Kitchener's intrigue turned into genuine interest. Though the Rangers wanted to sign Xhekaj on the spot, the defenseman was still eligible for the 2018 OHL entry draft, and instead of picking him at the event, Kitchener chose not to draft him and hoped that he was left unselected for a second year in a row. When the draft concluded and Xhekaj had been passed over once more, the Rangers promptly invited him to training camp. As the 2018-19 season approached, Xhekaj joined the Rangers for 2 different training camps, one in the spring and the other just before their season got underway. Though he would perform better in the spring than he did during preseason, Kitchener felt that the defenseman had the skills to become a solid depth player in the league, so they signed him to a contract out of camp. So after being left undrafted in each of the last 2 years, Arber Xhekaj had worked his way into the major juniors and had signed his first contract in the OHL. Though he was expected to be a fringe player at best during his tenure in the league, thanks to his performance in the years that followed, Xhekaj's career was only just getting started. The next 2 years of Xhekaj's career saw the defenseman suit up for the Rangers and find his footing in the OHL. After potting just 3 points in 59 games during his rookie season, the undrafted blue liner would produce improved numbers during his sophomore year, as he notched 17 points and 88 penalty minutes in just 51 games during the 2019-20 season. Now, while his scoring stats would make gradual progress, Xhekaj would see himself transform from a physical presence to an absolute beast during this span. Thanks to his natural athleticism and his commitment to off-ice training, Xhekaj would get bigger and stronger with each passing week. Couple that with his ever-growing confidence, and Xhekaj became an imposing presence who most opponents would avoid messing with for fear of suffering the consequences. Despite his physical dominance and his rapidly improving play though, Xhekaj wouldn't earn a selection at the NHL entry draft, as he was passed over during the 2019 and the 2020 events. In fact, Xhekaj was deemed so unimpressive that he never appeared on an NHL scouting list at any point during his draft eligibility. Considering that he is currently playing in the league, and given the impact he has already made on the Habs roster, that seems pretty crazy in hindsight, doesn't it? Though he had just been passed over in his 4th draft in 4 years, Xhekaj was ready to return to the OHL, continue his development in juniors, and take his game to the next level as an overager. However, both the OHL and the rest of the world had other plans. As the 2021 season began, the Ontario Hockey League was forced to postpone its schedule several times as a result of the global pandemic. Though they had originally hoped to begin in late 2020, a sudden shutdown across the province and continued struggles with the virus shifted the timeline to early 2021 instead. Though players and staff remained optimistic that they would eventually hit the ice, the OHL was forced to cancel its season entirely in April of 2021, the first time the league had done so during its 40-year history. Since their previous season had ended prematurely, and since they never got the following year started, the OHL's entire player base had nowhere to play for nearly 18 months, so they were forced to seek out other opportunities, either to continue their development or to make ends meet. One player to tick both of these boxes was Arber Xhekaj, who returned to Hamilton and began working at a Costco during the pandemic. Over the next 9 months, the defenseman would spend his days working for the wholesale company and use the money he earned to pay for his training and on-ice sessions whenever pandemic restrictions allowed the rinks to actually be open. However, Xhekaj would be fired from Costco midway through the pandemic, due to scheduling issues and not his skill, I might add, and he would be forced to retrain as a specialist for clay tennis courts just so he could keep paying for his training. Now, while a young athlete getting a normal job isn't something we praise too often, you can't help but respect Xhekaj's hustle, especially considering the numerous hurdles that he had already overcome within the sport itself. Once the OHL finally resumed operations and Xhekaj's season-long hiatus was over, the defenseman received a call from the Montreal Canadiens, who invited him to their rookie camp ahead of the 21-22 season. After impressing the Habs front office with a strong showing against his contemporaries, Xhekaj would earn an invitation to Montreal's pre-season training camp ahead of opening night, and though he would be returned to the OHL before the season commenced, Xhekaj would leave camp having secured an entry-level contract with the organisation. So after missing a season and a half of crucial development, and after working at a Costco for much of the pandemic, Arber Xhekaj had just signed his first pro contract with an NHL team. Now that's how you make a first impression, folks. Having been returned to Kitchener for the rest of the year, to say that Xhekaj would hit the ground running would be quite the understatement. After all, not only would he be named an alternate captain of the Rangers roster, the undrafted defenseman would grow to 6'4" and be listed at 225 pounds, making him the 3rd heaviest player across the entire OHL. Though the Sheriff had no trouble laying down the law, the blue liner would also see his point production skyrocket too. As a go-to guy for the Rangers, Xhekaj would play pivotal minutes in any and every situation, which he rewarded the team for by registering 17 points in his first 18 games of the year. That said, his physically imposing game did come with its costs, as Xhekaj was suspended on 2 separate occasions early in the year, the first being a 5-game suspension for a slew foot, and the second being a 3-game ban for making a sleeping gesture after a fight. As the OHL trade deadline approached, Xhekaj's impressive play had caught the attention of the Hamilton Bulldogs, who had already approached Kitchener about acquiring Xhekaj during the prior 2019-20 season. Since the Bulldogs were preparing for a championship run, the two sides were able to work out a deal the second time around, so Xhekaj joined the Bulldogs for the remainder of the season. Having returned to his hometown once again, and having moved back in with his parents, Xhekaj would fit his new side like a glove, as he scored 17 points and racked up 84 penalty minutes in 33 games with the team, bringing his full season totals to 34 points and 138 penalty minutes in just 51 regular season games. Oh, and he led all defensemen in plus-minus with a +44 rating, and he was named to the OHL's 3rd All-Star team too, just in case his scoring numbers weren't impressive enough. Now, while his regular season was an overwhelming success, Xhekaj would knock it out of the park during the postseason, as the overager would help an already stacked Bulldog squad become an unstoppable force in the OHL. Thanks to his strong physical presence, his emergent offensive game, and his shutdown defensive play, the blue liner would register 16 points in 18 playoff games to help Hamilton lift the J. Ross Robertson Cup as OHL champions. Not only that, he also potted 5 points in 5 games during the 2022 Memorial Cup, was named to the tournament's All-Star team, and helped the Bulldogs reach the final round. So he had a pretty good year for himself, all things considered. Once his third OHL season had concluded, and with him too old to return the following year, Xhekaj was ready to turn pro and work his way up to the National Hockey League. Thanks to his performance over the coming months though, Xhekaj would get his wish far sooner than anyone would expect. The current 22-23 season saw Xhekaj return to Montreal and join the Canadiens training camp for the second year in a row. Though he was expected to start in the minors with the AHL's Laval Rocket, notable injuries to Mike Matheson and Joel Edmondson opened several spots on Montreal's blue line, which the 21-year-old made a strong case to fill thanks to his aggressive and physical play during rookie tournaments and preseason contests. As training camp came to an end and the final cuts were made, Xhekaj would receive the greatest news of his career. He had earned a spot on Montreal's roster, and he would make his NHL debut on opening night. So after being left undrafted 4 times in 4 years, and after working at a Costco less than 2 years prior, Arber Xhekaj had surpassed all expectations and was about to play in the National Hockey League. If that doesn't put the biggest smile on your face, I don't know what will. Since then, Arber Xhekaj has spent the entire 22-23 season with the Habs, and he has made quite the first impression in the show. After all, the 21-year-old has potted 7 points in 23 games at the time of this recording. He has registered 56 penalty minutes during that span, and he has gotten into his fair share of fights while he's been at it too, including an absolute beatdown of noted league tough guy Zach Kassian. Sounds like a pretty successful debut if you ask me. Though he has produced modest numbers this season, and he is still a work in progress, Arber Xhekaj's journey to the National Hockey League is one of the most inspiring stories we have seen for quite some time. I mean, the guy had to fight for his place in juniors, he surpassed every expectation placed upon him, and he has somehow forced his way onto an NHL roster as an undrafted player. He has defied the odds and then some. Whether he stays in the show long term or whether he is demoted to the minors remains to be seen. But whatever you do, don't bet against him. You wouldn't be the first person to make that mistake, you know. And on that note, I'm going to end today's video. That was the story of Arber Xhekaj's journey from Costco to the NHL. What do you guys think about Xhekaj's career so far, or where it will go from here? Do you think he will become a mainstay in the league for many years to come, or do you think he is destined for a lengthy tenure in the minors instead? Do let me know in the comments below, I would really love to hear what you guys think, but thank you very much for watching guys, I do hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Bexy93, Burned Retinas, Drew Fawcett, Houston NG, Raquel and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.